You're listening to the Real Lawyers Podcast. I'm Kevin O'Keefe of LexBlog. This podcast is for lawyers and legal professionals who use blogging and publishing to build a name, build relationships, and build a strong book of business. And so what if your next blog post or article, not a brief or a memo, was what brought people to your law firm, brought you work? In today's episode, we'll look at what it really means in practice, how lawyers are using blogging and other publishing to establish authority. And really, who better to talk to than my friend Todd Smith of Texas, who publishes the Texas Appellate Law. And I can tell you he's a true pioneer in legal blogging. I may have gone to him before he came to me. So let's get started. It's great to have you on, Todd. It really is.
It's great to be here, Kevin, and to get a chance to visit and catch up a little bit and talk a little blogging while we're doing it.
Yeah, and out of Texas, which I'm deeply familiar with from coming down to the Texas bar meetings and getting the opportunity to meet you and other lawyers down there. What made you start a blog? I mean, because not everybody was born to blog and said, "Hey, I'm going to do that." What made you start to do that?
Which time?
How about the first time?
Yeah, the first time. Yeah, that's a pretty easy story to tell. You take yourself back. Imagine, if you will, in the old Rod Serling approach. Go all the way back to 2006. When I was a 30-something-year-old lawyer who was leaving at the time, one of the largest Texas firms that has since merged into one of the largest global firms. And I had decided, after becoming board certified in civil appellate work in Texas, that I was going to start my own shop. But I didn't really have this great book of business. I was a cog in the machine in big law and was there to service the firm's clients. And so I didn't really know, how in the world am I going to bring in business? What am I going to do to get people to notice me or understand what it is that I do? And about that same time, blogging really kind of was getting started, legal blogging particularly. Unlike some of our mutual friends, I can't lay claim to having the 5th legal blog ever put out in the world.
Right.
I was an early adopter, and I think I don't know where I ranked on the list of LexBlog clients in terms of the startup, but it had to be
pretty early.
It was maybe a 3-digit number, something like that, I would imagine. But pretty early. I remember distinctly my first contract with LexBlog. I think we signed in 2007. And I had been blogging a little bit before that, and I wanted to up my game. And that's why I came to you after seeing you online, of course, because you were very active in the space even way back then. But to get back to your question, I was looking for a way to put my thoughts out there in the world and for people to get to know me and what I did, to understand why I was qualified as a relatively young lawyer at that time to do what I did. And so I just started blogging, and I had no idea what I was doing. At that time, I was, there were others to go by, but blogging at the time was really still evolving, especially legal blogging. And so I just started doing it. I can't remember the name of the service that I used in the beginning, but the graphic quality, compared to what we see today was like, I might as well have been drawing it with a crayon. It was pretty seriously, not visually appealing. But even at that time in 2007, LexBlog was ahead of the game when it came to design and making a visually appealing. What we came to know, I think even then it was established as a blog. I was looking for a web presence too.
Right.
Just because I needed people to be able to find me. And so as to what I was writing, I just decided I was going to maybe put out some case summaries, talk about, Texas Supreme Court cases, talk about issues that trial lawyers face, and, in an indirect way, let them know how I could help them.
Right.
With the kinds of problems that they're facing, especially as cases get ready to go up on appeal. And that's really still my approach today. It's been largely my approach to marketing my firm. The first iteration, just for clarity, and the reason why I asked which time is because, I took a little break from being in solo practice or small firm practice and went to an AmLaw 200 firm for about 4 years, where I was, what I published, I still had a lot of freedom to do that. But when it came down to where I did it, the firm really wanted to have more control over, publishing on, say, their site versus a site that was published under my name,
right,
and so forth. But when I decided that I was going to capitalize on, again, what the market was doing, how it was treating solos and small firms with some specialized expertise in an area of the law. I decided to start up again on my own. And of course, when I did that, one of the first things I did, I think even it was before I started talking with you all because I knew, I'm going to come across as a big time LexBlog fanboy here, but I knew that if anybody could do what I wanted and do it right in a way that I could depend on, it would be LexBlog. So I was happy to restart blogging under my own name, under the Texas Appellate Council, which is the name of my firm. Texas Appellate Council, PLLC, going back really to the beginning of 2025 when I opened my new practice.
Yeah, because and to put it in perspective as to when you started, I mean, we only had, I'm sitting here with this vision that blogging is absolutely perfect for lawyers. I'm reading a book on blogs, and they were talking about if you were reading a blog by a plumber and you were redoing your house and you came downstairs one morning and there was 1 inch of water all over, who would you call? You'd call the plumber who blogged.
Yep.
And I kept thinking, holy cow, I used to call us plumbers in law school. We were just going to get paid more an hour. So let's not get too carried away. So my heart's racing. I go, I'm going to start a company that, does blogs for lawyers. And you know what it's like to tell your spouse you're going to go start something on your own. And that is, there's a lot of uncertainty in that. I think we only had seven blogs at the end of 2004. And my goal was to double it by the end of 2005. So we had about 14 or 15. So if you were in that 06 area, you're in there pretty early, long before I was drawing a paycheck.
I know what you mean.
So, and I don't know. I still think there's something right about not knowing exactly what you're doing. Because when you go to blog, no matter whether it's today or whether it was back when you started, because it feels so real. It feels like a conversation. I mean, who knows how to strike up the conversation at some event? You just do the best you can. You're as nervous every time.
Well, the great thing about it at that time, maybe less so today because there's a whole lot more blogs and other ways of publishing on the internet. But great thing about it back in 2007 is I was early enough where it was still kind of a novelty. For quite a while, we've talked about this off and on over the years, but for quite a while when I would go to an in-person event and I'd met someone that didn't know me before personally, I would get oh, you're the guy with that blog, which was always a conversation starter, at the time.
Very much so.
So no, I didn't know what I was doing, how to publish,
right?
What to publish. And maybe, I don't know if I feel like I've learned a lot over the last, going on 2 decades, but sometimes I still don't feel like I know, what's out there other than just to publish something that I think, I think about it from the perspective of, okay, if I were someone sitting in the chair of the person who I'm trying to be useful to,
right?
Would I find this useful? Because, I don't have to tell you the blogs that scream at people about, a certain topic, or the blogs that are overly self-promotional. That's really not what it's all about. It's always been about providing value to the reader. And the side benefit is, they happen to get to know you. They understand that you know what you're talking about.
Right.
And they, as you said, if they're reading about Texas appellate law in some blog, then they happen to have an issue where they need that, then, you will be at least top of mind or near top of mind for that person. And they can easily find you, which was one of the greatest things back in those days too, was, Google was not nearly as complicated as it is now. And so it wasn't like you were trying to game the system, but the whole way that it's presented was far more straightforward than it is now. Get a few links, publish some blog posts, link to some other people, and before you know it, you're showing up really high in the search engine results. So that was a great benefit actually to me, to not only put my own stuff out there and have people comment to me about it, but also to be able to be found far easier than if I were going and just starting a generic website with basically an online business card. Who would want to even see that? Right.
Yeah, or a website that just has a little link at the top, blog, which almost sounds to me
Oh,
like
right.
here's my
Yeah.
bike or my car.
Right.
What you build by blogging is you basically have a magazine, you have a publication. Your web presence is built all around it, but
Mm-hmm.
you're
Yep.
leading with help. You're leading with a conversation. The other thing that I'm struck by today, and you got to remember, in the time that's passed, there was no content marketing by term
Mm-hmm.
when you started. The people that are guiding large firms today as content marketing managers and content marketing directors, they may have been in kindergarten when Lexmark was starting. They may not have realized that some of the firms they're working at did not get their work from Yellow Pages. Those firms, if they were in Yellow Pages, if Baker McKenzie were in Yellow Pages, it might have had one line as to what their
Right.
address was in Houston or something.
Right.
But now all of this content is being produced is supposed to draw analytics and rankings off of Google. It's to me, it's just crazy, but I can't break through that very often. It's refreshing to
Yeah.
talk to you because you're trying to imagine what somebody sitting in the seat as a trial lawyer may want to know that you've picked up on. And that because you've had the opportunity to work in so many different cases, helping trial lawyers from the start or afterwards, you have a perspective that other people don't have, and you're just putting it in your own words. You're not trying to say, okay, how do I produce this piece of content marketing to get out the
Right.
door? What do you think
Yeah.
about all the stuff that's going on today? Because the world has changed from the day you started as far as how firms put out content.
Well, that's a big question
Yeah, it
to
is.
try and answer. Looking at it from the firm perspective, I mean, having come out of a firm, just over 9 months ago, I
Right.
know what my former firm was doing, which they were very thoughtful and conscientious about what they were putting out. I mean, you
Right.
don't find a firm, AmLaw 200 level is going to be just throwing out anything. They're very deliberate in what they do. In terms of content marketing more generally, there's far more noise to try to sift through before you actually find the signal.
Right.
And so, but I think there's tools out there now, obviously, that weren't available in 2007 that, I kind of lament I miss what blogs were in the beginning, which was basically just an online discussion board.
Yeah.
Where you had comments that people would make and they would, it was actually thoughtful. It was before the spammers really took over and made it where it just almost ruined, that's too strong a word. It diminished the exchange of ideas.
Right.
When the spammers took over and the bots took over. And even though there were things designed to filter out those types of pieces of content that were trying to hijack your blog page, you got other media that kind of took the place of it. Like, for a long time, Twitter really filled that space. And now, of course, we see what's happened with Twitter over the last couple of years. And so there's to me, there's a little bit of a void there because I really appreciated the more back and forth exchange that we had on blogs when they first started. And people, even potential clients, you had to be careful how you address them in blog comments, but you would actually have potential clients reach out to you in a comment to a blog post. And you can kind of replicate that to some degree, maybe on LinkedIn, but that's about as close as it gets these days to that
It's
sort of exchange that I thought was just, you got almost immediate reactions sometimes to what you were publishing. And it's a lot harder to get that now, I think, for two reasons. The second reason, aside from how the information is presented, is because people just have to filter through that much more stuff to get to the good stuff.
Yeah. It's, I think what people don't realize is that it's not about the words. The blogging is almost the currency of conversation that allows you to build relationships with people, and it allows you to build that reputation. So the end goal is not how many words or how much traffic. It's that relationships that you build by connecting with people through your blogging. And I still think that happens because if I put out something and I reference a third party, they see it and we're connecting. And I try to make a conscious effort of that. In fact, of all things, I've been going back and using Feedly the last a month. I go, I see some pretty good stuff in here, and I'm going to reference what I'm reading and provide my take. It's not like comments, but it's getting there. And
Yeah.
then the other thing, realizing it's the reputation that I'm building overall, building this body of work that I'm doing. And at the end of the day, I don't know how it works for you, but my guess after you've been around the corner in appellate law for as long as you have a pretty good reputation, and you're getting work by referrals, coming direct by referrals.
Yeah.
And those referral sources, they're looking at who you are. They're not coming because they found you on a random search at Google. They're coming because somebody told them that Todd's pretty good. Go look him up. And then they look at, I'm going to guess, they look at you and they go, he covers this stuff and writes about it. Might be a good person to call.
Right.
I don't know how you feel about that whole cycle of getting work.
It's funny because having had this sort of blogging rebirth, I had this idea of what I wanted it to look like when I was restarting my own practice. And it's still a work in progress.
Yeah.
I'm actually, the timing of this talk is interesting because I'm spending a lot more time trying to figure out what I want to say and how I want to say it in a public sphere. There's a lot of people out there. I think a lot of these folks have good things to say and maybe some don't, who will tell you, blogging's dead. You really shouldn't spend time trying to develop this one site that, your distribution channels are somewhat limited. You get a better algorithm on LinkedIn or whichever platform. But I think ultimately for me, when I decided to start the site and come back to LexBlog, it was all about, I always have to own my own online real estate. And, I am in charge of the content. I alone decide what it is. I can add to, change, do whatever I want with it. And anybody who wants to check me out or anybody else who has a blog has a very ready place to do that. I mean, they can search me up on Google and find LinkedIn posts that I've done that could convey some of the same information. But ultimately, in terms of having one, I think as you mentioned at the beginning, having sort of a hub of where my thought content comes from or resides. That's what I always wanted for this site. And when I created it, I thought, well, I can use this as a hub. And then if I want to repurpose content, I can do it from here. And I know that that's something that, you've advocated over the years. It's like, look, there's plenty of other channels that are valid to communicate with people. I mean, Kevin O'Keefe's on Facebook. He's on LinkedIn. He's on, Twitter or X or whatever they're calling it these days.
Right.
And those are good places to have other conversations, and those are where you get the more two-way conversations, as I was getting at earlier. But I think it's as strange as it sounds, for somebody who's been doing this off and on for a long time, I think my thought process on blogging is still evolving.
Yeah,
and
mine is too.
Now you've got tools available to help, with content creation. That's where I'm struggling because, in the early days, there was nothing published anywhere that went out under my name that wasn't, thought through very thoroughly and carefully and written directly by my hand.
Yeah.
And it's so easy now. I think this is one of the big differences between now and where we were in 2007 is, you can subscribe to a bunch of different services that'll either write it for you or retweak it and publish it for you, which can have a lot of value if it's done right. But it's I guess it's a variation. Everything stays the same, right? It's a variation on back in the day when a law firm would hire somebody to blog for them. You're just using a different agent.
Yeah.
But now the agents can actually speak in your voice, which is a big upside, right?
Yeah.
And if you're in control of the content, then there's tools. I'm looking at myself now thinking, I really need to be publishing more and focusing on things that are not just my podcast episodes, which I like to do, but there's so many more things I can talk about. And so it's nice to kind of feel like I'm sort of coming back to figuring out what I want to do with the site and sort of back to the beginning, back to my roots, as it were, because that's what I really enjoy is putting out content that is helpful to folks who may happen to need the kinds of services that I provide.
Yeah, I do the same thing. I mean, I'm leading a blogging company, and I struggled with it this year as I started to renew my passion after 4 or 5 years. What was I? What was this thing? Blogging just happened to be the term because you had a blog that democratized publishing. What were you going to do beforehand? You weren't going to put it up with tables and cells on an HTML.
Right.
Your words, because text was not segmented from design. The two were wired together to do a website. And whatever they would have called it, that would have been the name of this thing. It just happened to be called a blog. So really, as I started to reflect on it, it was publishing. I was a small town trial lawyer. Matthew Bender asked me to do a chapter on Matthew, learn treatises for trial. I thought it was amazing. I'm applying what I use. I got the volume on my shelf, and I don't know if anybody else read it. But I was published. I remember thinking, I'm published. The practitioner has been democratized. Their publishing has been democratized. And as we go from when you were in law school, and there were law reviews, I don't know if they were on the basement or on the first floor, but mine were on the first floor in the back. But they were everything, South Carolina Law Review, South Carolina Environmental Law Review. I'm going, who reads all this? This is amazing. They went back to the 1800s. A lot of them had dust on the top, and maybe I looked up American Law Review late at night to find something for a judge to highlight it and draw some analogy. But I always thought that someday we could have practitioners publishing, contributing to the analysis of the law, people like you. And it wouldn't have to come from a credentialed legal periodical law review. I think we're there. I think we're short some publishers because they're off thinking they have to do this other type of thing for the internet. But they're losing sight of the fact that you're a publisher and you're going to leave a legacy at the end of your time you practice, that you left a good body of Texas appellate law for the next person to build upon and for the people around you to build upon. So I got to believe that there are judges and clerks, and clerks inside law firms that go to your blog and read what you've written. I don't know how you view that.
With the latest iteration, I know that was true in some former versions. In the latest iteration, that just tying back to my previous comments, it's a little harder to get that direct feedback because there's other players in the game.
Right.
But I agree with you that, when I started this site, I really thought about this in terms of, I do want this to be a publication and one that people will read, subscribe to if they're inclined, and be able to find useful. The other purpose that I always found, another way of thinking about blogging too, was as my own sort of knowledge repository. Sometimes I will misplace research I've done and I will think, didn't I write a blog post about this? And now, of course, having done it over a period of decades, it could go back quite a ways and maybe the blog post is still out there somewhere but needs to be updated. That to me, like if I write a blog post about a particular point of, say, the appellate procedure, I'm also doing it not only to educate and benefit the people who read it, but also it's a great resource for my own self.
Okay.
Because then I can go back and look at, this is what I thought and wrote at the time. And I wouldn't have published that if I didn't think it was right. So it does give me a bit of a jumping off point. I can go back and look at old posts and say, that's how it was. Now, what do I need to do? Sometimes those posts need to be updated. And so the benefit, and where I really have no excuse for not publishing more, is I do have a catalog of old blog posts that can be brought out, dusted off, and refurbished a little bit and put back out in the world with an update. So I think you're right. I think there's a lot of room to publish original ideas in this format. We have a lot of opportunity to if you want to sit down and write a law review article, that's great, but that's a multi-month, hundreds of pages, hundreds of footnotes proposition. Right. Blogging is sort of indicative of the internet in general, which you get a lot quicker dose of dopamine from writing and publishing and just putting it out there and say, well, I hope somebody likes it without spending months and months and months doing it. But it is, out there for others to see and consume and hopefully get some value from.
I want to ask a few other things.
Sure.
Lexblog will probably roll into Lexblog Publishing, believe it or not. And I don't think we need to pull the name blog out of it to do it. Because we're finding that not only are other blogs coming up, but there's individual pieces that lawyers are writing, and they're getting lost in the shuffle. They're just, they have no home. Imagine a library, a network of people that publish. There's bloggers whose content is coming in. There's individual pieces that are coming in, and every one of them, can have their own, page. Here's all of their publishing. Here's a profile of them. We're building but it's turned out to be attractive to secondary law to the research platforms. So Lexblog and VLex just signed an agreement. We'll bring out some news on that so that as people are using VLex, they'll be able to have research with those blogs. And it's not going to be a large language model that is talking back at you with the content, but with AI, it will accelerate getting that information next to the research and documents that people might be working on. So if
Nice.
all of a sudden there's something that Todd Smith may have written on, he didn't need to worry about the fact that this lawyer that's in Houston or Dallas or God knows, he'd be in New York City, all of a sudden it pops up next to a brief that they're working on or research they're doing or a clerk is doing. And that become pretty darn cool because then the other thing that's happening at large firms that I didn't know until I started talking to some CMOs, they were getting rid of the old content because after like 6 years, it was considered to be old and putting weight on their search rankings. And I'm just going, what? I was not on Law Review, but I'm trying to imagine somebody at Yale that was on Law Review is now at the firm. They're putting up content. They're building a legacy as a lawyer. And she finds out that her content's being thrown out because it's old content marketing. It was blowing my mind. So I think there's I can see it almost like when blogging started and feel just as passionate. My God, this is the time. This is the time where more people can contribute in meaningful ways and that information can be retrieved faster because it's silly when you think about it that we relied on a giant yellow pages, which was Google, to serve up finding legal information. I mean, when did we decide that all the law reviews and that are all the legal insight that was coming from practitioners that was so valuable would compete against stuff that was written by marketing people that were buying ads for $1 million a year? It's silly. I mean, imagine if your public library was that way, just surrounded by noise, and you go somewhere in here, there's somebody that wrote something good.
Yeah,
So
for sure.
I don't know what you think of that, having that out there where you can find other appellate lawyers, different stuff on it, and find it quickly, and maybe even dovetail off it in your own writing.
Oh, I think it's valuable. I do follow other appellate law blogs, and it's not quite delivered in the format that you're talking about, but I do think they give me ideas. They make me think about, okay, well, how would that apply in Texas? Is there an equivalent doctrine, or does this perhaps spin off a desire in me to write on this topic in parallel and applying Texas law, for example? So, I mean, from what you're saying, it kind of sounds like you think this is turning into another sort of secondary source that not only legal scholars, but lawyers can refer to when it comes to answering questions, whatever they may be in whatever format. And I mean, the way I've always gone about it and the way I was taught to do it was if there was an area of the law that I didn't know very well, first thing you do is go grab the governing treatise.
Right.
And you learn, what you need to learn, at least from a big picture perspective from the treatise. I guess today you could start by asking ChatGPT, but, I think that comes with a certain amount of risk.
Right.
That probably if you've got a blog published by a reputable lawyer, I think that would take you just as far down the road potentially on probably more narrow issues than what you would find in a treatise, but, it could still be authoritative. And yeah.
So that's what I'm thinking. And then to reach out to appellate lawyers in different states and say, hey, this isn't being covered. Here's an opportunity for you. Hey, have you seen what Todd Smith is doing down in Texas? There's nobody doing a really good job in Missouri or Mississippi or whatever. Why don't you sink your teeth into it, because we need to fill that gap. And as we fill that gap, not only are you going to learn from each other the way that appellate laws are being done, but you might find that you've written the law review over the next 20 years for this. And as we accelerate AI and retrieving information, not just as an LLM, it becomes important. So you've left a legacy that's real. You're not competing with. I'm amazed now that I hear people just getting on the net that are just say, this is nothing fancy. You just have to apply the GGE standard to your content now, and it'll automatically appear on AI. And I'm going, my God, this is crazier than Google.
Yeah, I'm aware of making things AI search friendly. I have not even begun to try and game the system to try to get there.
Yeah. Sometimes when I've gone in and asked for questions or deep research, it's cited the hell out of me. And I go, I didn't even ask it to cite me. But I guess I've been writing and blogging for lawyers so long that it's gone that way. I wanted to ask you, I mean, do you have 2 kids, 2 boys,
I have 2 adult sons. They're 23 and 20. So we're at a fun stage of life. They're all fun stages, but this is a particularly fun stage because they're, young adults, either finding their way out in the world now or getting ready to. In fact, my older son has no interest in becoming a lawyer, but my younger one is potentially heading down that road. So we're at an interesting time right now.
That's good. Yeah, and one of the things you've always done is people know who you are, and they know who your kids are, then who your wife is, through social media. They get to know you as a person. Has it always come naturally to you? I mean, you were just there.
Yeah, I think so. I was an early adopter to social media too, and just like blogging. And I saw the potential, really, it's kind of the same approach, really, just to be authentic, genuine, again, share useful information. It was not always about my work. It was,
Right.
you have to show yourself really for people to do that classic, know, like, and trust, right? Before they'll hire you. And so I've always thought that it was perfectly fine to share, some amount of personal detail on social media, really of almost any type. In LinkedIn, I don't always talk about personal stuff, but certainly, Facebook, that's really all it was in the beginning. It kind of became a business tool later. And then Twitter was always kind of a mix, I think, from the beginning, once we figured out what in the heck a tweet was.
But I had met you before, but I came to know you. I came to like you. I liked the way you loved your family and the activities you did with your family.
Yeah.
And that didn't come easy to me personally, going out and networking as a young lawyer, to say, hey,
Yeah.
you got to go to the Rotary or whatever. These things seem to really work. What did your wife say and your family say when all of a sudden Dad's out going to be a blogger? Which not every dad was a blogger when this all started.
My kids were too young to really have much to say about it the first time around. I had to explain to Julie, my wife of 28 years, what blogging was and why I was doing it and why I was doing that instead of working on the legal matters that I had sitting in the hopper, ready to generate revenue to support our young family. And eventually, she came to understand that, hey, this is important for lots of reasons. And you do have to think about it. It's not just philanthropic, right?
Right.
You do it in part because you enjoy it. You do it because you want to do it. I do it because I enjoy it. But you also do it, again, it's that side benefit of enhancing your reputation and developing business and helping to grow your practice. So, and she had a background of, working in a hospital. She didn't know what marketing was. Her job was within the four walls of the hospital. And when she left at 5 o'clock, that was it for the day.
Right.
Well, when she married me, she quickly figured out that's not how the law is. And so she came around pretty quickly. And certainly now, after all this time, and of course, a little tidbit to add to this is that she worked with me for about 10 years in my former practice. And when I restarted, the first thing, she was my first hire back into my new practice as the administrator of the firm. And so she now, I mean, there's been a couple of times that she's been approached about not quite getting poached away, but she's made her own little network. It's not, right. I don't mean to say little as if I'm being condescending at all, because it's actually pretty powerful, but she learned a lot pretty quickly. And I think now is very supportive of it because she sees the value in it.
You've been through all these years. What has the blog meant as far as a business development tool? How much work has it grown for you? I'm not asking you for the last dollar, but some lawyers still ask me, are you honestly telling me that you could blog and get work from it? And I go, yeah, there's lawyers that have done it.
Yeah, 100%. Certainly early on when there was a lot less competition, not only among blogs, but other things that are trying to get your attention and monetize your attention. It is hard to measure like direct ROI. I mean, right. You always want to know where somebody found you, but what I think has happened over time is it is a reputation enhancer, but what it does is it does build up your overall reputation and standing in the legal community, so that I know you've over the years talked about people, and maybe I sort of fall into this category to some degree, who, while they started a blog early and they blog, eventually they don't have as much time to do it anymore.
Right.
But it's funny how they still have benefited from the blogging and continues their career kind of stays on that uptick, right? So I would say, for me, early on as a younger lawyer, it was really a difference maker. I mean, I was putting as I said, I was laying myself bare into the world. And I think people really appreciated that. Not very many people who do what I do were doing that at the time. When I was starting, there was nobody doing what I did in Texas exactly. And shortly after, there was one more person who started. And I remember having lunch with that person and him telling me when he saw my blog, his heart sank because it was like, oh, well, that's it. I'll never break into this now because Todd's going to corner the market. That did not turn out to be the case for him. In fact, he's had a lot of success himself and is really not blogging anymore. He's got so much work to do. But I think what it has meant to my career overall is I think it helped me really get established and differentiate myself in a time when, as a younger lawyer just starting his own practice, that was an extremely difficult thing to do. The law, being able to develop business as a lawyer and as a solo is critical to your survival. And I was able to leverage blogging to do something I enjoyed doing, which is be helpful, but also to help build my practice. And I think even over the period that I wasn't blogging as actively, I think overall I've just benefited from that in my career, 100%.
This last year, there's actually more law applicants. They've grown in number because of some of them are just more passionate about the law today of all the different things going on. Some because of other job opportunities and whatnot. There's certainly more niches in the law than there were 20 years ago. AI is inventing them by the day.
For sure.
The different issues that come up, that one could get passionate about. If you were sitting there talking to students as a law alum at your law school, and they ask you about this blogging thing, and they said, would it be worth my while to blog on something I was passionate about and kind of get my name out there? What would you tell them?
Well, for sure, I would say do it. I mean, you're going to build a tribe at some level. People, if you're doing it right, I've not been one to take really controversial positions in blogging. Right. Some people thrive on that. I don't. But those who do, there's a pretty substantial part of the population who's going to agree with them and join their tribe.
Right.
And there's another part that's going to say, I don't really like what that person has to say. Well, okay, fine. If you're making some people mad, you're not necessarily doing it wrong.
Right.
It means you're stoking the fire in somebody, which is a good thing. I unfortunately just happen to practice in an area where it's really hard to get that passionate, appellate law. Wow. What can you say about that? It is a nerdy area for sure.
Yeah, but it was when I had to, I didn't want to do the briefs, but to me, it was like putting together the pieces of a jigsaw puzzle. How are we going to do this thing? It is. Where's it going to fit?
That's the part I love is the strategy part.
How does that piece fit in down below after we set this up above? And you're smarter than me and can look at it differently. But I just look at the opportunity that students have because most people won't do it.
Well, that's it. That's exactly right.
It's not that I think all the students are lazy that aren't doing it. It's just that sometimes the law schools don't put it out there as something that you may want to do. Some law professors say don't do it because you don't know anything yet. Some placement offices said don't do it. You're going to damage yourself. You'll never get hired. And I just look at it and I'm still incredibly passionate about trying to help people. And I think this is a great tool to do it because I sit and talk with people like you and I go, look at Todd. Look what he's done.
Well, I think, those who would tell students not to do it, I think if you're doing it authentically, and you have to be somewhat vulnerable. You have to acknowledge that you don't know everything.
Yeah.
And who better to acknowledge that than a law student? You can sort of live it in public. I see tech companies following this approach all the time. They're building things out in public. They're learning as they go, putting it all out there for people to see. And to me, I think that and you're a great example of this, no doubt about it, Kevin. But I think that just adds an immense amount of credibility to what they write. And you can take it too far, right? There's a line you really shouldn't cross. Yeah. But again, if you're doing it honestly, you're showing that you're trying to learn. You're learning about something well enough that you can write about it and then effectively teach others about it, which to me is kind of the key of that learning process. You will go so much farther if you actually do take the time to sit and think, put your thoughts on virtual paper and put it out there, for public consumption. Then you'll go, just keeping it to yourself and not having any discourse with anyone. To me, it's a good exercise in testing what you think because there are going to be things that people will disagree with you about. And That's a kind of open discourse is still important in academia. It's still important in the professional world. And if you're going to be an advocate for a living, then why not? Why not put yourself out there? So what I would say.
I appreciate you saying all this. And I'm going to come back to you and say, how do we create, a network inside of Lexblog Publishing for appellate lawyers? Who are those appellate lawyers, or maybe even students just graduating that could write an appellate law blog for their state?
Mm-hmm.
And what would be so bad about having 50, and in some states, there'd have to be more. You have federal, you have state, you have all this type of stuff.
Yeah.
Why not have some really smart people that are in law schools and young lawyers do this? The amount of law that could be explained to other people would be phenomenal. So I keep thinking about in the back of my mind, there's certain areas that just feel like they should be their own network within a network for Lexblog Publishing. And appellate law just feels like, man. And it's something we don't all get into. I mean, as a trial lawyer, that was the worst thing I wanted to have happen. You could have it go up on appeal after we won.
Yeah, for sure.
And how are we going to keep it? We know
Your point is good, though. I mean, if you look at the law as a gigantic body, it's really unwieldy and unmanageable. But you start to narrow it down where it's, okay, you're talking, we have 50 states, we have, circuit courts, Supreme Court. It's a much more finite universe of a topic to write about. And there are still so many topics within, subtopics to write about within. You can have a general advocacy skills kind of approach. You can have what I started off doing, is case summaries, but I stopped doing that pretty early on, because now you can get that. There's lots and lots of people that provide case summaries. So, before the age of AI, when I would actually have to read every word of the case to be able to summarize it, that was a useful exercise for me, but it was very labor intensive. And now I don't feel like I have to do that. Where I think I can add value, and where I think there's room for plenty of other people to talk on this topic is, what's your take on this specific area? There's a brand new case out of the Texas Supreme Court. Well, okay, the Supreme Court itself puts out case summaries, so a case summary isn't very useful. But what is the impact of this case? How is it, from your perspective, from my perspective, after 30 years of doing this for a living, what is the significance of the case? And what's really fun to see is if you write a piece like that, whether your prediction comes true, but you have to stick around to be able to actually benefit from that.
Right.
So I look forward to doing maybe more of that kind of publishing. I think I mentioned, I've been kind of focused on tying my content back to my podcast. And I've wrapped my podcast into my Lexblog blog, which has been good because there's, as you know, from doing your own podcast now for a while, it's such a good idea generator for things to talk about online. I mean, it's amazing.
I mean, we're sitting here talking, we might as well be talking over a beer in a pub, and you think about what should I talk to him about, and then we start to talk, and I'm thinking about 5 other things. I'm thinking about I can't use this guy's time.
And you look up and you're 49 minutes into it, and you're like, wait,
how did this all happen?
Yeah.
And the last thing I would point out on that, like when you're talking about niches and niches, you get Dave Donahue. What does he do? Just IP litigation, just in the Northern District, just in the Chicago area. All of a sudden he's got judges coming up and shaking his hands. What does he do next? Retail patent litigation. I mean, you got Francis Pileggi. I mean, Francis would almost acknowledge he could barely run a computer, but we had to tell him how to do so from Seattle. And he wants to just cover the Chancery Court in Delaware because there's so much coming through it. And then he had to start to cherry pick the things coming through it because it was too much. Again, the same thing. Judges are coming up saying, I want to introduce you to this other judge.
Yeah.
Because you pick that niche, and the niches are still there. You can you could use it. What I found in AI was, okay, I'm a recent law grad from Indiana. I think I want to go back to Iowa where I grew up. And what type of, if I wanted to have a niche and I wanted to start blogging, what would I do? Okay, you got to do ag because it's 95% of businesses. What in ag would be particularly helpful?
Yeah.
It would be this. And I'm thinking, oh my God, so I could publish basically a magazine on an issue that would be must have by all the ag business owners in the whole state of Iowa.
Yeah, that feeds into the point I was making earlier about you look at the body of the law and you narrow it down and say, oh, we're just going to talk about appellate law. Well, I mean, something I think about, it's like maybe I should focus, my niche should basically just be the Supreme Court of Texas. Now, that could be done, and I could find plenty to write about and just focus on that court if I wanted to. There's no shortage. Anybody else could do the same. Or you could focus on, say, one of the intermediate appellate courts. And it can be regional. There have been blogs over time that have cropped up that have focused like that, but for whatever reason, generally they haven't lasted forever. I think it's just, you got to find something that you are, as you suggest, passionate about and are willing to invest the time in. And to me, if it dovetails with your practice, it's a lot less work. It's not really work.
Because you're going to get clients. You're learning all the time. And as I listen to you now, I mean, I think one of the things that LexBlog could do a better job of is putting the people up on the pedestals, the attagirls and the attaboys that are doing this. Here's the best publishers. We've had these books out there for years, best lawyers, super lawyers, all these type of things. And it's good to get. But what about best publishers? And who are the best publishers? Yeah. And here they are in different states, and here they are by subjects. And we're not doing this just to get newsletters out to in-house counsel. We're doing it because of our prowess and their knowledge and wanting to share with the public. No, it could be very cool. I appreciate all your time.
I'm happy to do it
today. I've looked forward to doing this for a while. You said hold off until you got a few months under your belt with the new firm and whatnot. And I love you for what you guys did. I mean, you basically said, hey, I'm going to go out and start my own firm again. And your wife, Julie, was right there with you to say, okay, here we go.
She was. The advantage this time was we knew exactly what we were getting into. Because when I was young and stupid with a toddler and an infant at home, that's a decision. That's a really hard one. Somebody could ask me if I would do that again. Of course, today I would say yes because it worked out. But I had a lot more knowledge this time around. It's just the benefit of being on the earth as long as you and I have, Kevin. You get that experience, and blogging's certainly been a big part of that. And I've appreciated everything that LexBlog has done for me over the years. You make it easy. Your folks are great to work with, and it's just been a real pleasure.
We'll use you as a testimonial as we expand the appellate blog network.
Feel free.
Well, that's it for today's episode of Real Lawyers Podcast. If you've enjoyed the conversation, be sure to follow or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and share it with another lawyer who cares about their craft of publishing. The Real Lawyers Podcast is brought to you by LexBlog, helping lawyers publish with purpose and to build a name and they trust. And it's now become the world's largest publishing network, believe it or not, with lawyers with over 60,000 publishers. I'm Kevin O'Keefe. Thanks for listening, and thank you for your time. See you next time.